Do you know that feeling? That gut punch when you realize your husband isn't just cheating on you, he's cheating the federal government, and he was stupid enough to use our joint bank account to do it. He never imagined I would be the one to look. My name is Maya. I am 38 years old, and my job is to find the truth hidden inside numbers. I'm a freelance forensic accountant, and I work from a quiet, sterile office in our house in Denver, Colorado. My clients hire me to peel back the layers of complex spreadsheets and find out where the money truly went. I trace digital ghosts. I uncover fraud, embezzlement, and carefully constructed financial lies. It's meticulous work, requiring a clinical detachment and an obsession with detail. I thought I left that work at my desk. My life outside that room was supposed to be different. It was centered on my daughter, Lily, who is 8, and my husband, Rick Larson. Rick is the star. He's the charismatic dealmaker at Apex Development Group, a man climbing the ladder of Denver's cutthroat real estate world. He dreams in concrete and glass. I dream in ledgers and receipts. He was always the one with the big personality, the easy smile, and the ambition that burned bright enough for both of us. I was organizing our finances. It was a monthly ritual, something I did with a cup of tea after Lily was in bed. Rick was late again, a common occurrence as he pushed to get his massive new project approved. I was reconciling our joint savings account when I saw the line item. It wasn't the amount that caught my eye, though $5,000 is not insignificant. It was the repetition, a $5,000 wire transfer every month for the last 6 months. The recipient was coded as R.G. Consulting. I stopped. My breath didn't hitch, my heart didn't race. Instead, the air in the room grew cold and thin. The analytical, detached part of my brain, the part I use for clients, clicked into place, pushing the wife aside. I didn't know R.G., consulting, Rick's business expenses, his entertainment budgets. All of that was supposed to run through Apex. This was coming from our personal accounts, our joint savings, the money we were setting aside for Lily's education. My fingers moved with practiced speed. I opened a secure browser. I didn't need to search for RG Consulting. I knew it would be a dead end. I went straight to the state's business registration database. I found it. RG Consulting, LLC, a limited liability company registered exactly 6 months ago. There was no website, no corporate filing, just a digital P.O. box and a registered agent. The agent's name was Sloan Davenport. The name was unfamiliar, just another piece of data. I ran her name through a wider search, cross-referencing news articles and social media. The screen lit up. Sloan Davenport was not a contractor. She wasn't an architect or a designer. Sloan Davenport was the chief of staff for City Councilman Arthur Vance. The room seemed to shrink. Arthur Vance, the populist man of the people, the squeaky clean politician who had built his entire career on opposing greedy developers like Apex. Arthur Vance, the man Rick complained about every single night, the man whose single deciding vote was the only thing standing between Rick and the approval of his career-defining $50 million Riverbend project. The pieces didn't just fall into place, they slammed together with the force of a car crash. Rick's project was stalled. Vance was the roadblock. Sloan Davenport was Vance's gatekeeper, and Rick was paying Sloan Davenport $5,000 a month. This was not a simple affair. An affair is messy, personal. This was a transaction. This was a felony. My husband wasn't just cheating on me. He was engaged in active criminal bribery, or perhaps he was being extorted. Either way, he was using our marital assets, our daughter's future, to finance it. The betrayal I should have felt was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. The suffocating realization was that he thought I was just a wife. He had forgotten what I actually do for a living. I did not cry. I did not throw the laptop against the wall. I did not call his phone and demand answers. Instead, I opened a new, encrypted spreadsheet. I began to quietly back up our bank records. I downloaded every statement, every transfer confirmation, every text message saved to our shared cloud. I didn't need a confrontation. I needed an audit, and I was beginning one. right here, at my own kitchen table. I became a ghost in my own home. By day, I was the supportive wife, the engaged mother. I made breakfast for Lily. I kissed Rick goodbye, and I listened patiently when he came home at night, slamming his briefcase down on the granite countertop. "Vance is an ideologue," he'd rant, pouring a whiskey I knew he'd bill to Apex. "His office is rigid. They are obstructing progress at every turn. That woman, his chief of staff, is a brick wall." "That sounds so frustrating, honey," I'd murmur, wiping down a counter that was already clean. I'd ask about the project, feigning interest in the zoning variances and the material sourcing. He'd complain about the stiffness of Vance's office, and I'd nod, my expression a mask of empathy. But when the house was dark, when Lily was asleep and Rick was passed out, the true work began. Rick thought I only managed the household budget. He had forgotten, or perhaps never bothered to know, that my name was still the primary administrator on our shared family cloud server. He used it for Overflow, a digital dumping ground for old files. He didn't realize it also created automatic, hidden backups of his phone and laptop. He also thought his corporate credit cards were his private domain. He forgot I had helped him set up the business accounts years ago. My administrator credentials were never revoked. I didn't need to guess his passwords. I just walked in the digital front door. The $5,000 monthly payment was just the entry fee. The travel and entertainment ledger was where the real story was written. My husband wasn't just corrupt, he was a cliché. I found the receipts. Lavish, multi-night stays at the Brown Palace, categorized as investor relations. Weekend trips to ski resorts in Aspen, filed as on-site project analysis. The rooms were booked under false names, a weak attempt at discretion, but the charges all traced back to Rick's Apex corporate card. The dates were the most damning. They matched perfectly. The weekends he had told me he was at a leadership conference in Dallas, or the nights he was stuck in a late-night drafting session with the architects. This was sloppy, arrogant. But the true twist came when I dug deeper into the cloud server. I wasn't just looking for an affair. I was looking for the conspiracy. I searched the email archives for Sloan. Nothing. He wasn't that stupid, but he was stupid enough to use the shell company's name. I searched RG Consulting. One email chain appeared, dated 6 months prior. It was between Rick and David Thorne, Apex Development's general counsel. My breath caught. Rick had written David. "We need to finalize the payment structure for the RG consultation. How do we keep this clean and off the project's main ledger?" The lawyer's reply was cold, precise, and utterly damning Rick. "As we discussed, all payments to RG will be routed through your T&E budget under strategic zoning fees. Keep Sloan happy. This is a standard cost of business for a project of this magnitude. The key is plausible deniability." My hands were steady on the keyboard. This was it. This was the moment the floor fell away. Plausible deniability. Standard cost of business. This wasn't just Rick panicking and paying off a mistress. This was a calculated, corporate-sanctioned bribery scheme. Apex knew. His lawyer knew. They were all in on it. This confirmation turned my investigation from a personal betrayal into a professional obligation. I moved to the phone backups. He had deleted the text threads. But the cloud never forgets. I found the messages between him and Sloan. They were everything I expected, and so much more. There was the sordid, desperate sexting, of course, but tucked between the explicit photos were the negotiations. Sloan Arthur is being a fool about the environmental impact report. He won't budge. Rick, he doesn't have to budge. What do you need to make him re-evaluate, Sloan? He's worried about his legacy. I'm worried about my next vacation. That Aspen hotel was nice, but I hear Vail is better this time of year. In another exchange, Sloan. He's demanding a 30% low-income housing concession. He thinks he's saving the world. Rick, 30%. She's insane. That kills the project. Tell him I can do 20. Max. Sloan. 20% is going to cost you. Rick. And I'm not just talking about the R.G. fee. My skin crawled. Sloan was playing a double game. She was taking Rick's money and his company's money, all while pretending to represent the interests of her boss. She was bleeding my husband dry, and he was letting her, using our family's money to do it. For the next 2 hours, I worked. I was no longer a wife. I was a forensic accountant building an airtight case. I downloaded every bank statement. I took screenshots of the lawyer's emails. I exported the entire text message history. I compiled the hotel folios, the fake names, and the credit card statements into a single, comprehensive timeline. I organized the data into folders: financial fraud, corporate complicity, wire transfers, T&E violations. When I was done, I transferred the gigabytes of data to a new, encrypted solid-state hard drive. I locked the drive with a 24-word alphanumeric passcode that existed only in my memory. I walked into my home office, slid the small drive into a hollowed-out textbook on interstate tax law, and placed it back on the shelf. It was a safe Rick didn't know I had. I sat back, the sun just beginning to hint at the horizon. I had started this audit looking for an affair. What I found was a federal crime. I didn't just have grounds for a divorce. I had the leverage to destroy an entire company. The grief that should have come, the hot rage of a wife betrayed, never arrived. It was replaced by a cold, calculating stillness. The part of me that was Rick's wife had died at the kitchen table. The part that was a forensic accountant was now fully in control. I stopped thinking about my marriage and started thinking like a strategist. I had a file of evidence that could detonate 3 lives in a $50 million project. The question was not if I would use it, but how. I needed to map the blast radius. I had 3 primary targets. First, Rick. He was arrogant, blinded by ambition, and utterly reckless. He'd used our joint account. Confronting him now would be a catastrophic mistake. He would lie. He would gaslight me. And the moment my back was turned, he would begin destroying the evidence, purging the servers, and hiding the assets. A direct fight with Rick was an emotional move, and I was done with emotion. Second, Sloan Davenport. She was greedy, but she was also smart. She was cunning enough to play both sides, extorting Rick while managing her boss. If I went after Sloan directly, if I sent the file to Councilman Vance, what would happen? She would fight back. She would immediately claim Rick was harassing her, that he was the one pushing the bribes. She might even try to implicate Vance himself, claiming he knew all along. She would drag Rick down, yes, but she would create a cloud of chaos, a he said, she said that might obscure the truth. She was a cornered animal and unpredictable. That left the third target, the true center of gravity, Councilman Arthur Vance. Vance's entire political identity was built on one word: integrity. He was the incorruptible outsider, the man fighting for the little guy against the downtown developers like Apex. His reputation wasn't just part of his job, it was his entire asset. He was the one with everything to lose, not from his own actions, but from the actions of the woman he trusted. I realized the true leverage wasn't the affair, and it wasn't even the bribery itself. The leverage was Arthur Vance's public image. He could survive an incompetent chief of staff. He could not, under any circumstances, survive a chief of staff who was secretly taking bribes from the very developer he was publicly crusading against. It would make him look, at best, like a fool. At worst, complicit. My target was set. It wasn't Rick. It wasn't Sloan. My goal was to kill the Riverbend project. Rick didn't love me. I had come to terms with that. But he loved this project. It was his identity, his ambition, his entire future. If I just exposed his affair, he might be embarrassed. He might lose his job. But if I killed the project, I would destroy his reputation within Apex and in all of Denver. I would take away the one thing he valued more than his family. I put my plan into motion. I spent a full day researching, not them, but their enemies. I mapped the political opponents of Arthur Vance on the city council. I identified the primary competitors of Apex Development, the other firms that would love to see them fail. And I researched the media. I didn't want a blogger. I wanted a killer. I found her Celeste Wu, an investigative reporter for the Denver Sentinel. She had a reputation for breaking complex stories about municipal corruption. She had already taken down 2 city officials in the last 3 years. She was hungry, and she was thorough. I was ready to move. But one final search gave me the last piece of leverage I needed. I found an article in a political strategy newsletter, a small-time publication, but well-sourced. It outlined Arthur Vance's long-term plan. He wasn't just a councilman. He was quietly building a campaign exploratory committee. He was planning to run for mayor of Denver next year. That was the twist. A scandal now, a year before his announcement, wasn't just an embarrassment. It was an absolute catastrophe. It was a career-ending event. I wouldn't attack him directly. I wouldn't attack Rick. I wouldn't even attack Sloan. I would do what I do best. I would present the data. I would leak the information, strategically and anonymously, to the one person who would know exactly how to use it. I would give Celeste Wu the tip of the spear, and then I would sit back and watch Arthur Vance, in his desperation to save his own political career, tear my husband's world apart. I began to prepare the package. I drove for 20 minutes, crossing the South Platte River into a part of Denver I rarely visited. I needed a new location, a different pattern. My digital hygiene had to be perfect. I found a small, independent coffee shop, the kind wedged between a dry cleaner and a defunct yoga studio. It was loud, crowded with students, and the air smelled like burnt beans. It was perfect. I paid cash for a black coffee, then found a small table in the back corner, my back firmly against the wall, giving me a clear view of the entire room and the entrance. I opened my laptop, its screen angled low and away from any casual observers. I connected to the unsecured public Wi-Fi. My first step was creating a new identity. I used a browser I never touch, opening a private window to access a well-known encrypted email service based in Switzerland. I created a temporary anonymous account. The username was a random string of characters. The password was one I would use once and then discard. This email address would exist for exactly 1 hour, then self-destruct. I had my target. Not the police, they were too slow, and their investigation would be public, alerting Rick. Not Arthur Vance, he would bury it to save himself. The recipient was Celeste Wu. Her reputation at the Denver Sentinel was legendary. She was a shark, and I was about to chum the water. I opened a new message. Subject A tip regarding Vance's office in the Riverbend project. I kept the body of the email short, clinical, and devoid of emotion. This could not sound like a scorned wife. It had to sound like a disgruntled employee, a rival, or a concerned insider, someone credible. Ms. Wu, you should investigate the relationship between Councilman Arthur Vance's chief of staff, Sloan Davenport, and Apex Development Group. Apex's $50 million Riverbend project is currently stalled, awaiting a key vote from Councilman Vance. Sloan Davenport is receiving suspicious, recurring monthly payments from an Apex-linked source, funneled through a shell LLC called RG Consulting. I've attached documents for your review. I suggest you follow the money. That was it. I didn't include the hotel receipts. I didn't include the text messages. I included nothing about the affair. This wasn't about sex. It was about corruption. Making it personal would make it weak. Making it political would make it a career killer. I attached 2 files from the encrypted hard drive. First, a PDF of our joint bank statement from 3 months prior. I had spent an hour in a secure editing program, redacting my name, Rick's name, and our account number. The only information visible was the bank's logo, the date, and the line item, a $5,000 wire transfer to RG Consulting. Second, a screenshot of the Secretary of State's business filing for RG Consulting. It showed the date of creation 6 months ago, and it showed the registered agent Sloan Davenport. This was the arrow. The bank statement proved the payment. The business filing proved who it went to. Celeste Wu could do the rest. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the precipice. The moment the plan moved from thought to action, the click was almost silent. A tiny, definitive snap. The arrow was in the air. I waited 60 seconds. I didn't need a confirmation. I logged out of the encrypted email service, navigated to the account settings, and selected the permanently delete account option. I typed the complex password one last time and confirmed. The account, the sent message, the IP data, all of it was instantly scrubbed. I closed the laptop, slid it into my bag, and stood up. I left the full cup of coffee on the table. I drove home, stopping at the grocery store to create a paper trail, an alibi for my time. I bought milk, bread, and ingredients for Lily's favorite pasta. I walked into the house an hour later. Rick was in the living room, shoes still on the phone. He looked exhausted. "I don't care what the projections say." He barked into his phone. "Just get the votes. I'm handling Vance." He hung up and rubbed the bridge of his nose, then looked up as I entered. "Hey," he said, his voice flat. "Hey," I replied, my voice full of practiced wifely warmth. I held up the grocery bag. "Rough day, don't worry. I'll make dinner. Lily has homework, and I thought we could all eat together." He nodded, oblivious. I walked into the kitchen, the heart of my home, and began boiling water, a perfect portrait of domestic stability. The bomb was armed. The timer was ticking. The first 72 hours were the loudest silence I had ever experienced. The house felt like a pressure cooker. I went about my routine school drop-offs, client calls, making dinner, but I was hyper-aware of Rick. He was a caged animal. His phone, usually tossed on the counter, was now glued to his hand. He'd stare at it, willing it to ring, or perhaps willing it not to. His agitation was a vibration in the air. He was short with Lily, sharp with me. "Everything okay?" I'd ask. "Just busy." He'd snap, his thumb endlessly scrolling. It happened on Wednesday. He came home late, well past 8. I was in the kitchen, pretending to read a cookbook. The sound of the garage door was normal, but the footsteps weren't. They were heavy, slow. He walked in, and I looked up. His face was ashen, not just tired, but pale, sick. He had loosened his tie, and I could see a film of sweat on his forehead despite the cool evening. He dropped his briefcase, not on the floor, but on the chair, missing it slightly. "Rick," I asked, putting the cookbook down. He looked at me, his eyes unfocused. "A reporter called Vance's office," he said. His voice was flat, hollowed out. I put just the right amount of concerned confusion into my voice. "A reporter. What about some garbage about a conflict of interest?" He spat the words out. "Some hack from the Sentinel." I walked toward him, playing the role I had perfected. "Oh no, honey." I touched his arm. He flinched. "A conflict of interest. What are they even implying? That's awful." "It's nothing," he said, pulling away, trying to regain his bravado. "It's just political mudslinging. Vance is trying to make a mess for me. That's all. He's trying to kill the project with bad press." "Of course," I said, rubbing his shoulder. "They're just threatened by you." He nodded, wanting to believe it. He grabbed a bottle of water, then walked into the pantry, thinking the closed door would muffle his voice. He was wrong. I remained perfectly still, listening. His voice was a low, furious hiss. "You told me it was clean," he whispered, shouted into the phone. "You said R.G. was airtight. How the hell did they know about R.G.?" A pause. He was listening. I could imagine Sloane on the other end, defensive or dismissive. "I don't care what you think," he hissed. "I care what they know. A reporter called, the Sentinel. Fix it. Sloane, you fix this." He slammed the phone shut, or at least ended the call abruptly. He came out of the pantry, saw me, and froze. Just a contractor," he stammered. "Total screw-up. I have to handle everything." "Of course," I said softly. You have so much on your plate. The next morning, I saw it. Celeste Wu hadn't gone for the front page. Not yet. She was smarter than that. She'd posted it on the Denver Sentinel's online political blog. It was a warning shot. The headline was carefully worded, "Councilman's office alleged murky ties to Riverbend developer." I read the article over my morning coffee. Rick still asleep upstairs. Celeste had used my breadcrumbs perfectly. The article didn't name Rick. It didn't name Sloan. It didn't even name Apex. It just referred to a prominent downtown developer and a senior staffer in Vance's office. But it did name the shell company, RG Consulting. It questioned the optics, the lack of transparency, and the potential for undue influence on the upcoming Riverbend vote. It was just enough to start the fire, to make the other animals in the water smell blood. Rick saw the article an hour later. I heard a muffled roar from the bathroom. His phone rang. Then it rang again. And again. He came downstairs dressed for war, his jaw tight. "I have to go in," he said. "Emergency meeting." "Is it about that article?" I asked. All innocence. His eyes narrowed. "You read that it's trash." "No. The board called me in. We're adjusting the project timelines. The zoning board is pushing things back." He walked out the door, his lie hanging in the air between us. An emergency board meeting wasn't about timelines. It was about damage control. He was lying, and he knew I knew he was lying, but the charade had to continue. I turned back to my own computer. His lie didn't matter. The blood was in the water. I had my own work to do. I logged into my financial tracking software. While Rick was off dealing with the public fallout, I was busy monitoring the private data. I had an alert set on his Apex employee stock options. I watched the internal valuation, waiting, calculating the precise moment his hubris would be quantified in a dollar amount I could use. The first crack had appeared. The rest of the structure was about to come down. Rick was fighting a war on the outside, consumed by the fire I had started. He was blind to the one I was building on the inside. His panic made him sloppy. My anger made me meticulous. The Sentinel article had given me a crucial window. Rick was distracted, his entire focus consumed by Apex and his lawyers, trying to contain the external threat. He was putting out fires. I was building my fortress. I realized the encrypted hard drive wasn't enough. It was leverage, but it wasn't protection. I needed a lawyer. But I didn't search for the top divorce attorneys in Denver. A divorce lawyer would file motions for discovery, would fight over the house and the bank accounts. That was a battle on Rick's terms. I was facing a problem far more complex. My husband had committed federal crimes using our joint assets. I needed a different kind of lawyer. I made a call from a burner phone app, using a number not associated with my name. I called Julia Ramirez. Julia and I had come up an accounting firm together, two women in a sea of gray suits. We'd spent late nights auditing impossible books. I had always been the better analyst, but Julia had been the more ruthless one. She had left accounting, gone to law school, and was now a partner at a boutique firm specializing in one thing: white-collar crime. We met at a hotel bar downtown, a place neither of us would ever go. I paid in cash. "Maya," she said, her eyes as sharp as I remembered. "You look stressed. This isn't a social call." "It's not," I said. I didn't frame it as a divorce. I framed it as a risk assessment. "Julia, I'm here as a potential client. I have a hypothetical situation. I believe my husband, through his company, is engaged in a significant bribery scheme. I have found evidence that he is using marital assets to finance it. My priority is not the marriage. My priority is decoupling. I need to know my liability." Julia's demeanor shifted. The faint smile disappeared. She was no longer an old colleague. She was a lawyer. "How significant? $50 million project. Payments to a city council chief of staff. Corporate counsel is involved." Julia's eyes widened. Just slightly. "Jesus, Maya, you don't have a liability problem. You have a potential co-conspirator problem. You're his wife. Your name is on the accounts. In the eyes of the feds, marital assets means joint assets. You've been benefiting from the proceeds of this, whether you knew it or not." My blood ran cold. I had been so focused on his betrayal. I hadn't fully calculated my own exposure. "Here's what you're facing," Julia said, leaning in. "If he gets indicted before you separate, the government will freeze everything. Everything. The house, the joint accounts, Lily's college fund. They'll claw back any money you try to move. You'll be left with nothing, and you'll be spending tens of thousands on your own defense." This was the twist I hadn't seen. The true, third twist. My hard drive was useless if I was sitting next to him at the defendant's table. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You don't need a shield, Maya. You need a knife. You have to sever the connection, legally and financially, before this blows up. You can't just move money. You have to file for divorce. Now. If I file, he'll know," I said. "He'll fight. He'll hide everything." "You don't give him a chance to fight," Julia said. "You prepare a separation agreement that he has no choice but to sign. You use the evidence you have not as a weapon for the courts, but as a negotiating tool for the settlement. But first, you build a lifeboat." Julia gave me my instructions. They were precise, and I followed them to the letter. That afternoon, I went to a different bank, one we had no relationship with. I opened a new business checking account under my own consulting LLC, an entity I had formed years ago but rarely used. It was legally mine, and mine alone. I began routing all my freelance income to it. Next, I followed Julia's most critical advice. I logged into our joint investment portfolio. I sold off $40,000 worth of mutual funds. It was a significant sum, but not large enough to trigger an automatic alert to Rick, who never checked the details. The electronic transfer notice would go to our joint email, which I managed. I deleted the confirmation. When the money settled, I transferred it to my new secret account. The memo line, "Retainer for anticipated legal and living expenses." I was building a firewall, brick by brick. My final move was for Lily. This was going to be ugly, and I needed to protect her. I called a highly recommended child therapist. I told the office it was for anxiety, that she was struggling with academic pressure at school. It was a plausible lie, one that would put a support system in place for her before the world fell apart. I had my lawyer. I had my exit fund. I had my daughter's network secured. Rick came home that night, drunk and agitated, ranting about the idiots on the board and how they didn't have the stomach for a real fight. He was so busy trying to douse the flames I had set. He never even smelled the smoke from the fire I was building right under his feet. He had no idea I was already gone. Celeste Wu's first article had been a warning shot. The second one, 2 days later, was a kill shot. It was the front page of the Denver Sentinel, above the fold, with a picture of Sloan Davenport walking into City Hall. The headline was a cannon blast, "Pay to play Vance's chief of staff linked to developers' shell company." The article was a masterpiece of journalistic destruction. Celeste Wu named Sloan Davenport. She named R.G. Consulting. Citing her anonymous sources, she detailed the existence of over $30,000 in payments made over the last 6 months. She didn't name Rick. She didn't have to. The article attributed the payments to a bank account linked to a senior-level executive at Apex Development Group. The city exploded. The runaway train had left the station. By 10 a.m., Arthur Vance, the man whose entire career was built on being clean, was in full-blown panic. He had to get ahead of the story, to cut off the limb before the infection spread to him. He called an emergency press conference on the steps of City Hall. I watched the live stream on my laptop, the volume low, as I mechanically sorted laundry. He was brilliant, in his own slimy way. He approached the podium with a look of profound, personal sorrow. He was shocked. He was deeply betrayed, and he was furious that a member of his staff, someone he trusted, would operate in such a manner. He announced that Sloan Davenport had been terminated, effective immediately. But he didn't stop there. To save his mayoral ambitions, he had to be the avenger. He publicly called on the city attorney and the ethics commission to launch a full, independent investigation into Sloan Davenport and into Apex Development. Then came the final, devastating blow. "To ensure there is not even a shadow of impropriety," Vance declared, his voice ringing with false righteousness, "I am immediately suspending consideration of the Riverbend project. It is tabled, indefinitely." The live stream cut to reporters shouting questions. I closed the laptop. The project was dead. The next domino fell just after lunch. Apex Development, now implicated in a citywide ethics probe, had to cauterize its own wound. That wound was Rick. He didn't call. I knew because his corporate email, which I still had, synced to my tablet, suddenly went dead. I tried to refresh. Invalid credentials. I tried to log into the Apex server portal he used from home. This user account has been suspended. They hadn't just fired him. They had excommunicated him. They had cut him off, locking him out of every digital door to protect their own servers from his potential tampering. He was adrift. He didn't come home for hours. When he finally walked in, it was past 11 at night. The sound of his key in the door was fumbling, weak. I was sitting in the kitchen in the dark. I flicked on the small island light. He looked terrible. His suit jacket was creased, his tie was gone, and his face was a pale, clammy gray. He looked like he'd been punched. He didn't yell. He didn't rage. He just walked to the center of the kitchen and stood there, staring at the polished floor. "It's over," he whispered. I stayed silent, letting the words hang in the air. "Vance killed the project," he said, his voice cracking. "It's dead, indefinitely." He finally looked at me, his eyes wide and hollow. The board suspended me. Maya, pending an internal investigation. They locked me out. My email, my key card, everything. Just gone. He collapsed onto one of the bar stools, burying his face in his hands. It was the most pathetic thing I had ever seen. He took a deep, shuddering breath and looked up. This was it. This was the moment of truth, the confession. "It was Sloan," he muttered, shaking his head. "She set me up. That whole RG consulting thing. It was a bad deal. A stupid consulting arrangement she roped me into. She must have been doing it to other people, too. She must have trapped me. And now they're blaming me." I stared at him. He had confessed to the career suicide, the financial implosion, the public humiliation. But he said nothing about the affair. Nothing about the Brown Palace. Nothing about Aspen. He had buried his infidelity under a lie about a bad consulting deal. He was still lying. Even now, at the absolute bottom, he was still lying. He looked at me, desperate for an ally. "I'm going to lose my job. Maya, we're going to lose everything." I walked over to him. He flinched, probably expecting me to scream. Instead, I put my hand on his shoulder. His entire body was trembling. I leaned down and put on the mask of the loving, supportive wife one last time. "Oh, Rick," I whispered, rubbing his back. "Don't worry. We'll figure this out. It's all going to be okay, honey." He let out a sob of relief, believing me. He leaned into my hand, this broken, deceitful shell of a man. I just stood there, patting his back, feeling nothing at all. 2 weeks passed. The internal investigation at Apex was a swift formality. Rick was officially fired. The termination letter, which arrived via certified mail, cited gross violation of company ethics and standards of conduct. He was trapped in the house with me. The silence, which had been my shield, was now his prison. The first few days, he was just a ghost, shuffling from the bedroom to the kitchen, his eyes vacant, his phone silent. Then the despair curdled into something else. It turned into anger, and the anger needed a target. He started drinking, not just his usual evening whiskey, but a heavy, all-day affair that started with vodka in his orange juice. He'd sit in the living room, the blinds drawn, the television off, just drinking and staring. I was in the kitchen, on my laptop, lining up my next move with Julia. He walked in, his gait unsteady, a half-empty glass in his hand. He looked at me, at my computer, with a raw, unfamiliar contempt. "What?" I asked, my voice neutral. "You." He slurred. "You just sit there, tapping away at your little computer, on your little client calls. You have no idea what real pressure is. Do you—" I didn't engage. "Rick, you're drunk." "And you're not," he sneered. "You're always just fine. While I'm out there, trying to build something, getting my hands dirty, taking all the risks, you're just here. With your little part-time job." His words hit a nerve, but my face remained placid. "My little part-time job, as you call it, is currently our only source of income." I closed the laptop slowly. "You have lost your job. Rick, we need to talk about the finances." He stared at me for a beat, and then he laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was a dry, bitter barking sound that was more of a cough. It was the ugliest sound I had ever heard. "Talk about finances," he said, his voice dripping with a sudden toxic confidence. "Maya, I am the finances. I am the man who paid for this house, for this granite, for the car you drive, for the clothes on our daughter's back. You are nothing without me." I looked at him, truly looked at him. This arrogant, broken, pathetic man. He had lost everything, and he still believed he was in control. "You're wrong," I said, my voice quiet, but cutting through the alcohol fumes. "You didn't pay for this. We did, and you used our money to pay Sloane Davenport." The silence that followed was absolute. The color drained from his face, faster than I'd seen on the night he was suspended. The drunken haze vanished, replaced by the sharp, cold shock of realization. He knew. He knew that I knew. He didn't move for a full 10 seconds. His transition from despair to aggression was terrifyingly fast. "So what?" he finally hissed, his face contorting. "So what if I did? What are you going to do about it?" He took a step toward me, jabbing his finger in the air. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Sitting there, judging me. At least I was trying to do something big. At least I was in the game. What are you going to do now?" "Huh, divorce me." He let out another one of those bark laughs. "Go ahead, try it. You'll be destroyed. You won't survive 1 month. 1 month. Maya." "You have no idea how this works." He leaned in closer, his breath hot and sour with whiskey. His eyes were wild, but his voice was full of a strange, sudden, poisonous joy. He thought he finally understood the situation. He thought this was his last, best weapon. "You'll come back," he whispered, a triumphant, ugly smile spreading across his face. "You'll try to leave. You'll see how hard it is out there, and you'll come crawling back. You'll beg me to take you back. You always do." I did not speak. I did not flinch. I did not cry. I just held his gaze. In his mind, he had just won the argument. He had just put me back in my box. But for me, in that one moment, he had handed me the last piece of validation I would ever need. He had sealed his own fate. I held his stare for 3 more seconds, letting his words hang in the air, engraving them into my memory. Then I said nothing. I turned around, my back to him. I walked out of the kitchen, down the short hallway to my home office. I walked inside. I closed the solid oak door, and I turned the deadbolt, the heavy click echoing in the silence of the house. The lock on my office door was a formality, a physical boundary for a fight that was already over. I slept on the sofa in my office, not out of fear, but out of preference. The next morning, I was at the kitchen table by 7. I had showered, dressed in a crisp blouse, and made coffee. I was waiting. He came down at 8:30. He was a wreck, his eyes bloodshot and puffy, his hair matted. He was wearing the same clothes as the day before. He saw me, in the practiced hangdog look of apology, the one I had seen 100 times after a drunken argument formed on his face. "Maya," he started, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Look, last night, I was out of line. I didn't mean it. We're in trouble, I know, but we can fix this. His apology died in his throat. He had just noticed the table. It was not set for breakfast. In front of my placemat were 2 3-inch thick binders, perfectly aligned. He frowned. What is that?" I took a calm sip of my coffee. "Rick, please sit down." He hesitated, then sank into the chair opposite me. I slid the first binder across the polished wood. The label on the spine was simple, printed in a clean, bold font, "Marital Settlement Agreement." He stared at it. Then he looked at me, and he laughed. It was the same hollow, arrogant laugh from last night. "A settlement, really, Maya. You had some cut-rate divorce lawyer draft this. Is that what this is all about?" He shoved the binder back at me. "I'm not signing anything. You want to fight? We'll fight. We'll drag this out in court for years. You have no idea what you're doing." "You're right. I'm not fighting you in court," I said evenly. I pushed the binder back to him. "This isn't a draft. It's a non-negotiable term of surrender. This," I tapped the binder, "is your only solution." "Solution to what?" He sneered. I placed my hand on the second binder. I slid it across the table. He read the spine, "Report on potentially fraudulent activities." His face went white. The drunken bravado, the arrogant posturing, all of it evaporated in an instant. He was just a terrified man in a dirty shirt. "You're still thinking of me as your wife," I said, my voice quiet and cold. "That's your mistake. You need to think of me as the forensic accountant who just spent 3 weeks auditing you." He couldn't speak. He just stared at the second binder as if it were a bomb. "That," I continued, "is my final audit of our finances for the last 3 years. It's a complete, itemized, and fully sourced report. It contains the wire transfer confirmations to R.G. Consulting. It contains the hotel folios from the Brown Palace and Aspen, which you filed as T&E expenses to Apex. That's tax fraud. Rick, filing personal expenses as business deductions." His hand was shaking. "It also contains the full recovered email chain between you and Apex's general counsel, discussing how to hide those payments from the ledger, which proves corporate conspiracy to commit bribery. And, of course, it details the $30,000 you siphoned from our joint savings to fund it. You didn't just use your money, you used our daughter's money." I leaned forward. "So, you have 2 options. It's very simple." I tapped the first binder. "Choice A. You sign the marital settlement agreement. Today, right now, in it, you agree to surrender your claim to this house, transferring the deed to me, free and clear. You will also forfeit 90% of our remaining liquid assets and your Apex stock options, which I have generously classified as restitution for the marital funds you embezzled. Finally, you will agree to my retaining sole physical and legal custody of Lily. You will have supervised visitation, contingent on a court-ordered sobriety test." 90%, he whispered, his voice cracking. "Sole custody. That's insane. You can't do that." "Which brings us to choice B," I said, my voice unchanged. I picked up the second binder. "The audit. You refuse to sign. You try to fight me. You hire that lawyer, and I take this report and I make 3 copies. The first copy goes to the IRS, detailing your tax fraud. The second copy goes to the Denver District Attorney's Office, detailing the bribery and wire fraud. And the third copy, I'll personally deliver it to Celeste Wu at the Denver Sentinel. I imagine she would love to see the uncensored version of her story, the one with all the names and hotel receipts." I put the binder down. "So, you see, Rick, you are going to lose the house. That's not in question. The only choice you have left is whether you lose your freedom along with it. Your choice. He didn't need to open the second binder. He had built his career on bluffs, and he knew a losing hand when he saw one. He knew I had him. I hadn't just checkmated him, I had flipped the entire board over. He opened the first binder, the settlement. His hands were visibly shaking now, not just from the hangover, but from the dawning, cold, sober realization of his total annihilation. He paged through the documents. Julia had been ruthless. The agreement was an ironclad masterpiece of legal devastation. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, a deep, primal hatred burning in them. You're a snake, Maya, a goddamn snake. You used our daughter's college fund to buy your mistress's silence, I replied, my voice as flat as a ledger. Go get your clothes. He didn't move for a full minute, his world collapsing in on him. Finally. He shoved himself back from the table, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. He was a defeated man. He walked up the stairs, his shoulders slumped, as he was angrily throwing his suits and golf shirts into a duffel bag. The doorbell rang. It was 9:30, exactly as planned. I opened it. Julia Ramirez walked in, looking sharp in a navy pantsuit, flanked by a bonded notary public. Is he ready? She asked. He's just packing his essentials, I said. Rick came downstairs, dragging a large rolling suitcase and a duffel bag. He stopped dead on the landing when he saw Julia and the notary. What is this? He spat. It's a signing party, Julia said, her voice bright and cold. We're here to witness and notarize the settlement agreement, so it can be filed with the court immediately. Saves us all time, doesn't it? Rick looked from her to me, trapped. He walked back to the table, snatched up my pen, and began signing. He didn't read the pages again. He just signed, his signature a furious, jagged scrawl, page after page, initial here, sign here, date here. The notary was efficient, stamping and signing each page, his official seal thudding onto the paper with a grim finality. It was done. Rick stood up. He grabbed his suitcase handle. He looked at me, his face a twisted mask of rage and disbelief. So, he sneered, where are you and Lily going to go? You can't afford this house, not even for 6 months. You'll be in some one-bedroom apartment by Christmas. I stood up and walked toward the front door. I crossed my arms. Oh, we're not going anywhere. Rick, I said. I'm keeping the house. I've already bought out your share. He stopped, his hand on the doorknob. What? How you can't? You don't have that kind of money. This was the last piece, the one I had saved for myself. It's funny, I said, leaning against the doorframe. While you were busy getting fired, I got a new client, Apex Development. His jaw literally dropped. What? They're in a bit of a panic. Turns out, when the city launches a full-scale ethics investigation, a company needs to cooperate. They need an independent forensic accountant to audit all of your T&E, your project budgets, and all of Sloan's back-channel communications, so they can show the DA their cleaning house. I smiled, a real, genuine smile. They paid a very, very generous retainer. Up front, turns out, cleaning up your mess is a high-value service. He was speechless. He wasn't just my ex-husband. He was my first client. I hadn't just taken his money. I had taken his job, his future, and his entire identity. I reached for an envelope on the small table by the door. I held it out to him. This is for you. He just stared at it, uncomprehending. I tucked it into the pocket of his rumpled suit jacket. What is it? He whispered. It's my new address, I said. So you'll know where to forward your mail. He looked at me, confused, and pulled it out. It was a single typewritten piece of paper with the address of the very house we were standing in. I opened the front door. I held it for him as he numbly dragged his suitcase over the threshold, onto the porch. He didn't look back. I watched him step out into the bright morning light, a ruined man with nowhere to go, And then I closed the door. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you are listening from. So please drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories and like this video. It really helps. And please, hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.